everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for this week's episode of When I Grow Up. On today's episode, it is my pleasure to welcome Daniel Wang. Hey, Daniel, how are you?
Hi, doing well.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Daniel, you are joining us from Ohio, correct?
Yes, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I grew up here, and now I'm back here after college, living and working. So
nice. And then where did you go to college?
I went to school at Georgia Tech. I studied mechanical engineering there for 4 years, just undergrad. And that's how we came to know each other through friends of friends. Yeah.
Yes, it's a lot of 2 degrees of separation, I feel like.
Right.
Edward's son is somebody that connected me with you, who's also been on the podcast for his genius graphic design work.
Absolutely.
But yeah, thank you again for joining me. So Daniel is what he called a humanitarian engineer, and I am super excited to hear more about what you do, Daniel. So without any more, delay, what is it that you do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's kind of not an easy answer. So, I'll try to make it make sense. So, I work for a small company here in Columbus, Ohio called Design Outreach, 2 words, and they are a Christian nonprofit engineering company, and each of those terms, means a lot to our identity. So, Christian being the first one, one of our core values is faith. So a lot of all the decisions we make, the work that we do, the reason that we're in this space is because we don't want to just serve people's physical needs, but also bring them the gospel, preaching the word to people, and you'll see how that comes up more. And the rest of it, I'll say, nonprofit is a big part of our work because the work that we do, a lot of times it doesn't stand to earn a profit. It's humanitarian work, right? So it's serving people in a way that's more altruistic. It's not like selling products, selling iPhones or something. And then engineering organization. So we spend most of our time doing research and development. And this is probably what's most looks like engineering. We're doing design work on the computer. We're doing testing. We're doing prototyping, all towards making products that can serve people better. And what I've been alluding to this whole time of serving and products, what does that mean? Our mission is we want to alleviate global poverty, which is a really big mission. And the way that we see ourselves being part of that mission is creating what we call life-sustaining technologies. And right now, our flagship product is something called the Life Pump. It's a hand-operated water pump. Because there's millions of people in the world, frankly, that don't have access to clean, reliable water. A lot of times they rely on what are called unprotected sources. They're just open streams, rivers, what they would call streams or rivers, but actually when you see it firsthand, it actually just looks like kind of like a muddy puddle. And it's exposed to the elements, it's exposed to animals walking through it, and just people putting their hands in it. There's no protection. It's an unprotected source. And that can lead to naturally a lot of diseases, a lot of harm for these people, but they often have no choice because they just have no other source of water. So this humanitarian space and creating hand pumps to serve these people, this is not like a new trend at all. This is work that humanitarian organizations, NGOs have been doing for decades. But if you ask our company and the way that we see the problem, there's something unsustainable and not long-term about the solutions that have been historically done and used in the field, because you see all these countries and all these organizations with really good intentions, I believe, are pouring, at this point, have probably poured over $1 trillion into African nations and just a lot of countries, not just Africa, but many countries who lack so much, and yet we don't see lasting change. These people are still often without water. They're still living in ways and in standards that are way below what we would deem acceptable for ourselves. And we trace a lot of that back to the motivations for your work, and also kind of the way that you approach technology. So we would say for our technology, we want to partner with the people that we serve rather than just giving them technology and kind of just dumping it on them and expecting them to use it and figure it out. But we want to step alongside them and train them to have agency and have some part of the repair and the maintenance. And also we commit to coming back to these communities over time, repairing these pumps, because the reason why a lot of times previous pumps have failed is because they don't get repaired, they break down, and then it just becomes non-functional. You have a well that can't be used anymore. And behind all of that, right, is our commitment to loving these people because we love Jesus. It's not because we stand to gain anything from it, but we want to see them be honored as human beings, and ultimately we want them to meet and know Jesus as well. So I think that combination of being a Christian nonprofit engineering organization, there are many Christian organizations, there are many engineering organizations, but there's not many that do exactly what we do in our space. So we take a lot of pride in that. And bringing this back full circle, that makes me a humanitarian engineer because I'm part of the engineering that goes on to do this. So I'm based here in the U.S. in Columbus, but obviously the work and the result of all our work and the hopes is to serve a lot of times these people in countries outside the U.S. So that was probably a longer answer than you expected. But
No, that was like amazing. Wow, this is like so fascinating to me because I think what you said, that there are a lot of, humanitarian organizations that do nonprofits, and then there's engineering organizations, but that are Christian, right? But to bring the two together seems really effective, like for me as a Christian myself, right?
right.
So, and then I'm married to an engineer as well, as I mentioned before we started recording. And so, even just it kind of resonates in the fact that, he himself as a structural engineer has always talked about like, wanting to do more with it instead of just building here in the US, and I didn't even know design outreach existed. It's
Me
so
neither.
amazing.
Me
That's
neither
so
until
cool.
just a few years ago. Yeah, and to your point, yeah, that was something that was really new to me too when I was in my senior year. So disclosure, I actually graduated in 2020, so I'm very new to the job
Yeah,
scene, the
yeah.
full-time market. Yeah, so maybe I don't look that young, but anyhow, well, before I graduated, I also, you know, in my heart, I had convictions about I wanted to do something clearly related to my major, mechanical
Mhm.
engineering, related to my interests, but also wanted to pair that with faith.
Mm.
And for the longest time, I really didn't know what that would look like. I had received, very good advice and input from pastors, from older Christian brothers and sisters, and their answers weren't bad, but they always kind of centered around just like, be honest in your work, don't cheat,
Mm.
don't lie, be excellent. And when you do have a chance to evangelize in your work, go ahead and do it and be bold about it. And those things are good. But for me personally, I was like, that doesn't feel satisfying. Like there must be something more.
Mm.
And I can tell the story later if you're interested, but through interesting circumstances and connections, I came to hear about design outreach. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting. I've never heard of anything like this before, where I could be an engineer, um, but also the work that I do is so directly connected to serving people and proclaiming the gospel.
Mm.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. And
Right.
and I'll be the first to say, I don't want to put design outreach on a pedestal or say that under engineering work is not important as a believer, but it's just a really great privilege to be able to see, yeah, such a direct connection between the work that we do and how it's serving people and benefiting people. So
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love it. Oh my goodness. I wish I was an engineer. Sign me up. But okay, so my question is now, you as an engineer, and you said that you do kind of, the parts of making the products for whatever work that you're doing that is sustainable, to make it sustainable in other countries and that need this kind of technology. So what does that mean for you? Like what does your day-to-day look like?
mm. Our design outreach, um, from what I've said so far, you probably don't have a scope or a sense of how big it is. We're a small company right now. We've you shouldn't quote me on these dates because it's not super clear to me, because it also kind of happened in phases. Our two co-founders, they met and were volunteering as engineers themselves in this space even before they formally incorporated the company. So
Oh
like,
wow.
they kind of have history before that. But I would
Yeah.
say we've been around for less than 10 years, almost 10 years now. And our team is probably around 12 to 15 between full-time and part-time staff.
Okay.
So it's a small team. I consider that a pretty small team. And because of that, you naturally just have your hands in a lot of buckets.
Mm.
So for me, it depends on a given project what I'll be doing. But so for instance, right now, one of my major projects is testing the next generation of gearbox. Gearbox is basically the metal enclosure that has two gears inside that if you probably be helpful if I could show a picture of a life pump, but normal hand pumps, you kind of do like an up and down motion. Like
Okay,
if you
right. So
imagine
it's
at like
like
a
what I'm
farmhouse.
imagining is like the one that's like in the ground,
Hmm.
and then it has the pump part, and then usually it has like a spout, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is that what it looks like, kind of?
That's what most hand pumps look like. And
Okay.
that's what I imagine too, if I think about
Okay.
like on a farmhouse or
Okay.
somewhere out in out in like the United States country.
Right,
That's what I would
right.
imagine and it's called a piston pump. That's the central mechanism of how it works. The
Uh-huh.
way our pump is different is it's just a completely different technology and mechanics that bring up the water. It's called a progressive cavity pump. That's like if you want to know the technical terminology, but it basically, instead of doing this up and down motion, now we have two handles and it's like a bicycle. It's like this kind of motion. And because of just how the technology is different, progressive cavity pumps have what we believe are a lot of advantages to other hand pumps. Progressive cavity pumps can pump water from deeper. They can reach deeper in the ground, because if you imagine as you're pulling water from the ground, I mean, water is pretty heavy, especially when you have to pull it
Mm.
from really deep underground. These traditional hand pumps, they can only go so deep before trying to pump that much water from that deep. It's just like humanly not possible. Like
Mhm.
you just get tired so quickly. You can't
Mhm.
do it.
Mhm.
But with the progressive cavity pump, because of the way the physics work, you can actually go a lot deeper and still be manageable for humans. And this is a
Mm.
big deal, reaching water deep, because I mean, in some cases, previously, when a community would need water and they only had the options of traditional hand pumps, they would say, hey, we know there's water, let's say 100 meters deep, but this hand pump can only reach 50. So, we can't even help you even if we wanted to. But the live pump is able to reach that deep. So now we have an option that previously wasn't even there. Or in examples where both pumps would be able to reach the same level, just like here in the US, a lot of these countries in Africa, they go through dry and wet seasons. So during the
Mhm.
dry seasons, the water table, the well and the reserve of water underground where you're pulling all the water from, it drops. So it can drop low enough that it'll actually go below the level of your pump. So then also you're not pumping water, you're just pumping air. So it's a really big advantage to be able to go deeper. And there's other advantages too to progressive cavity pumps. One being the way that the parts move and interact with one another. If they're
Mhm.
designed properly, they should be able to last a really long time without a lot of maintenance, which is a big obstacle
Right.
for a
Right.
lot of these rural communities that we're serving, because they don't have access to supply chain. They don't have access to technicians who can just go out there on a day's notice. And again, something that I'm alluding to that we say a lot at Design Outreach, we talk a lot about reliability and consistent
Mm.
access to water, because
Mm.
like for us, when I wake up in the morning, I don't think twice about whether I can wash my hands or flush the toilet or take a
Yes.
shower. And especially when there's a pandemic going on, like even more important that we're able to have access to clean water. And for these people, the consistency is what matters so much. In the past, if pumps break down and they can't depend on water always being there, they can't do things like raise livestock or plant gardens. They have to spend so much time in their day going to the river, going to these
Right.
distant locations and getting water that's not even clean. But when you can trust that water is always going to be there, you can invest your time into other things. Children are able to go to school,
Yes.
parents are able to do other things during their day. And so that's why this consistency, this uptime is so critical. And
Mm.
that's something we really, really push with our pumps. And I think we're proud to say that for some of the pumps that we've put in the country of Malawi, which is one of the countries we work in a lot in Africa. Um, our best success stories, they've been running for like 6-7 years now without need for major maintenance, which is like a really big deal. To put it in perspective, like they've done studies before of traditional hand pumps, and the statistics are wild. I don't want to say exact numbers because I don't remember, but like very often pumps can fail after just 6 to 12 months.
Oh my
And
gosh.
even if they do work longer than that, or like within like a 4 year span, even greater percentage are out of service and ultimately never get repaired. for a multitude of reasons. So, oh, again, you got me talking a lot
No,
about
I
just a
this
simple
is
question, but
This is
yeah.
great. I'm like so fascinated right now about even just the technology of the well being able to dig deeper because I do have friends that work in nonprofit organizations that are working themselves on getting water to communities. And I'm like, man, I need to tell them about this. I don't know how you guys find the places that, or how do you guys find the places that need your help?
That's a great question as well. So when I said earlier that we focus as an engineering company, the way we see ourselves and our role in this in serving people, excuse me, is primarily through research and development.
Okay.
We only have one office here in Ohio in the U.S., only one U.S. office, and so maybe connecting to your other question too, the work that I'm doing maybe on a daily basis is sometimes I mean, I haven't done much of it yet, but I know I will be using CAD and designing things and engineering drawings. I'll be communicating with uh, our manufacturing department to say like, hey, are these things can we make these things the way we want to?
Mm.
Right now, one of my important projects is testing that gearbox I was talking about earlier,
Yes, yes.
making sure that the gearbox lasts as long as we want it to, or at least we can try to verify it's going to have the reliability that we want it to have.
Mm.
Um, uh, Kind of like classic engineering steps towards like bringing a product to market.
Mm.
Um, so we at Design Outreach, we focus on that element of this humanitarian arc of serving people.
I see.
The people who actually put the pumps into the ground, who are doing a lot of the community outreach and working with people in the field, that often is not us
Mm.
directly, but partners that we come to know and work with in the field. And I think some people, or I mean, there's multiple ways of thinking about that. One could be, oh, you should be the ones doing everything in the process, because if you have control over the whole process, you have a lot more accountability, you have a lot more just control, and you can follow everything. Maybe it's more optimized. I think there's also a really good argument for the way we do it with partners in the field, because first of all, we have a small staff, so it'd be really hard for us to we're working in 10 countries now, to do all that work with just the limited number of people we have. And we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's foreign pastors, foreign missionaries, aid groups, humanitarian groups who have been in these countries for years, who know the people
Sure.
way better than we do, who
Yeah.
know the culture, who know, like, we don't want to we don't want to get rid of that. We want to tap into that. And if they have the same heart that we do, the same vision for serving these people, like, we want to come alongside them and do work with them, rather than
Mm.
trying to yeah, reinvent the wheel that they've already figured out.
Right,
And
right.
so, a lot of times they're the ones who have probably the best insight to make decisions about where to put pumps, which communities to serve. And those aren't easy decisions, because there are countless communities that need water, and we can only drill pumps right now so quickly and put in pumps so quickly. Like, our capacity is not infinite. And so those are hard decisions that I don't envy. Like, I would not want to make that.
Right.
Um, but a lot of times, yeah. So we call these organizations in the field like implementers. They're the ones actually putting the technology into the ground, into the field. Um, and we really value that partnership that we can have with them. So everyone's doing what they're most skilled at. These missionaries, they've gone to seminary, they've trained, they are very relational people. They know how to have these communities and prove their trust, or prove
Mm.
that we deserve their trust, that
Mhm, mhm.
when we come into the community and do all this work, that it's really for their good. And then for us, we're blessed by God to have talents and inclinations towards engineering and that kind of
Right.
work. Maybe not as much this relational field work, but this kind of, so everyone's, a valuable part in this big process. Um, and I said earlier that a lot of times we aren't the ones going into the field, but recently I actually did get to go to the field, because we don't go often, but sometimes with select projects, when they're really high stakes, or the partner, we stand to help the partner a lot if we show up.
Mhm, mhm.
We will actually go to the field. So
Okay.
um, I can share about that
Yeah,
in a
please do,
sec,
but I was
but
gonna ask you before you do, you said if the stakes are high, but what does that mean? What does that entail?
right. So a lot of times when we work with these partners, most life pumps that go into the ground, they go in without us there. There are, partners that we work with who sometimes we actually have some field staff in Africa,
Mhm.
individuals that we basically employ, who we've trained and excuse me, it's their job to help us with pump installations. They know the local language. They're actually local Africans that
Okay.
we work with. Um, High stakes, an example is a good example is the trip that I recently went on to Zimbabwe. We were working with a rural hospital in the northern part of the country called Karanda Mission Hospital, and they were planning to put in 19 life pumps for communities around the hospital, and that's a
Wow,
lot.
that's a
There's a lot
lot
of
of
pumps,
pumps.
and that's a lot of work for just the missionary team and even the gentleman we employ there. His name is Washington. It's a lot of work for them to do on their own, and so for us to be there, our team to support them and physically, put our backs into the work, because there's a lot of manual work when you got to put these pumps in. But also,
Mhm.
we are the experts on our own products, so we can troubleshoot. We can be there to make sure everything's going smoothly, so that when these pumps go in, they're working well from day one.
Sure, yeah.
And so that's an example of kind of like a higher stakes situation, and where it would make a lot of sense for us to spend the money and time to travel and support our
Right.
partners.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
19 pumps and everything needs to go right. I mean, like, I wouldn't imagine it goes right the first time either, because don't you have to dig and stuff too?
That's a really you have a really good intuition. Yeah. So a lot of times, or every when we do pump installations, a lot of work has to be done before we get there. So
Right.
drilling the actual hole, we usually lay a concrete pad to with the base to put the pump into. That work was done even before we got there.
Okay.
Um, but when we do get there, we help with the pump construction. And so I talk about pumps, and to me, since I've been seeing them every day, it makes a lot of sense to me. But the way I try to explain it is basically there's a gearbox at the top with handles that pull the water up into a spout, and a well is basically just a really really deep hole with water at the bottom.
Uh-huh.
And these pumps, the way they're built, are just really really long straws that you want to basically suck the water all the way out from the
Mm-hmm,
bottom.
mm-hmm.
And there's no way for us to like build this 100-meter straw and just ship it to Africa because it's
Right.
huge. So what we do
Right.
is we build it in sections, and then each of those pipe sections in the field, that's where we assemble everything by hand.
I
We
see.
lower it in by hand, and we eventually, when it gets really heavy with all these metal rods together, we have to use something called a chain hoist to lower it down. But basically, we construct this really really long straw that eventually reaches the bottom of the well and can pull the water up. So you're totally right. I actually, before I went on this trip, I was even under the impression that, I understand generally the work that we do, and putting in pumps is like pretty easy. You just build the straw in the field, you put it into the ground, you pump it, and it works. And I learned, well, a big thing I learned from this trip was it's not easy. It's really hard oftentimes
Mm,
when you're working. First of all, it's hot. You're working
right.
in the outdoors, in the bush, basically. And um, if anything goes wrong, which things do, you have to be really scrappy. You can't just go to
Mm,
Lowe's or Home Depot and buy replacement parts. There's nothing out there.
right.
And and yeah, it takes a lot of like cleverness to figure out when things go
Yeah,
wrong,
like,
like
so what
what to do.
happens? Like, if something goes wrong, like, what then?
Yeah, I mean, it's a case by case basis, but there were actually a few really, really standout examples from our trip where this happened. So one time, it was in this community called Kadondo, where we had put in a pump. Basically, we installed it, everything perfectly. We were at the very last step of like basically securing the pump, making sure it was good. And we realized the pump was jamming. Like you should be able to turn the handles normally, and water should come out from the very beginning. It shouldn't be an issue, but they were getting stuck. And my team and I, we realized really quickly, like this is very unusual. This doesn't happen. This shouldn't be happening. It should just be
Mhm,
pumping normally. And
mm.
there's so much resistance, you couldn't force it. And so we tried to pull the pump basically back out of the ground using this chain hoist, because it was very heavy, and the pump wouldn't pull out all the way, which was unusual. So we said, okay, well, let's put it back down. Maybe we need to collect our thoughts. Maybe we need to come back tomorrow to fix this, because we were running out of daylight at that point. And
Mhm.
when it gets dark in Zimbabwe, it's really dark because there's no
Mm.
street lights or anything. So
Mm.
we tried to put the pump back down. It wouldn't go down. So we had this pump like halfway in the air. It's really hard to describe without pictures, but this is a very
I
unusual
see it. I
situation.
see it in my head. Yeah,
You
yeah,
see it in your head?
yeah.
Okay. And and we were like, what is going on? This is so unusual. And eventually, thankfully, my boss was there, and he's been working, longer at this company than I have. So he has a lot more experience and knowledge of these pumps. And he said, I think we have to cut basically through the bottom of the first section of the straw. And this was like a pretty extreme decision. Like afterwards, because it turned out okay, we could joke about it, but it was akin to like cutting off your leg if you're stuck in a trap or something. Like
Oh my
we had never done
gosh.
this in the field. We're basically destroying part of our own pump to try to rescue it and figure out what's wrong. Thankfully, we were able to cut through it with a handsaw. We were able to pull out the pump, and we realized at the very bottom, for some reason, the bottom unit where the water first gets sucked in, it was clogged really thick with like mud and silt.
Hmm.
And that is unusual because usually that doesn't happen. The water in the bottom of these wells, when they're really deep, a lot of times the water as it from rain and from rivers and just like runoff as it flows through or seeps through the ground, it gets filtered and it becomes pretty clean at the bottom
I
actually.
see.
Um, but we had theories of like maybe the walls in the inside of the well had collapsed and kicked up a lot of dust and silt, and so for that reason it was getting clogged and whatnot. But this was just a really crazy example. Thank goodness we actually figured out what it was. It was being clogged, and so once we knew that, we were able to switch out the bottom section. Fortunately had a spare in our truck, and then we shortened the straw by one length to maybe lift the bottom of the pump a little higher where there might not be as much dirt at the bottom of the well. We
Hmm.
put everything back in, and then finally, thankfully, it worked. And at that point, it was like pitch black outside. We were working by the headlights of our trucks
Oh my
to try to get it finished.
goodness. But
Um,
how rewarding.
Absolutely. And it was an answered prayer. Like
Yeah.
when we first encountered the issue, we were like, oh my goodness, Lord, please give us wisdom to figure out what's going on, because
Mm.
this was the first time we'd ever encountered that specific problem in the field. We have very limited supplies to work with. Our home base where we were headquartered was like, at least a 30-40 minute drive. So it would be it's not feasible to go there and back to try to get replacement parts. And so, and every time we do pump installations, the community that's going to be served by that pump, they always come out and watch because it's a big deal when they get this pump. And you could see them there. You could sense already their disappointment, the fact that we were thinking about, oh, maybe we got to pull this pump, maybe we got to do something about
Right,
it.
of course.
Um, and something that was impressed upon me by our Zimbabwean teammates when we were working there is, like I said earlier, at Design Outreach, we talk a lot about sustainability, about long-term, like giving these people water over time and consistency. But sometimes we get so caught up in that, we forget that people also need water today. Like if we
Right.
didn't put this well in that day, it was just another day that this community had to drink dirty water.
Mm.
But to us, in our logic, we said, okay, if we can't figure out the problem today, maybe we got to come back tomorrow.
Right,
Maybe we'll have
right.
more tools, we'll have more time, it'll be daylight. But the Zimbabwean team members we were working with were like, no, we got to try to do this today. This community needs it.
Mm.
And yeah, so just working with all those feelings, all those uncertainties,
Yeah.
and still being able to, by God's grace, figuring out what to do was amazing, and
Yeah.
was a big lesson to me of like, this is hard work. It's not
Yes.
easy to put in
Yes.
pumps. And there's a cliche of like, if something's easy, everyone would do it. I think it's kind of true in this regard.
Mm.
And again, not to toot our own horn too much, but yeah, it's not easy work.
Your horn is worth tooting, honestly. Like I am completely amazed by the process of it all, and even just the heart behind it too is so cool. Like, man, I wish I had known about this, when I was in college, honestly. And I hope people listening, will know that you can bring your passions with your faith and make it into something so great, and which a lot of my guests do, honestly.
Mhm.
But okay, so I have another question. Like, I don't know if you know the answer to this though. Like, is it expensive? Like, where does the money come from to make
Mm.
these pumps?
No, that's a really good question. And you're onto something. And the short answer is, it's not cheap.
Uh-huh.
There's a reason why. I mean, there's many reasons why the traditional hand pumps that I was talking about, the ones with pistons, excuse me. There's many reasons why those were so popular, and
Mm.
there's so many of them in the world. One of them is they're cheap. They're really easy to make and
Oh, I
manufacture. And
see.
actually, the designs for a lot of those hand pumps are now public domain. So you can just look them up online and have access to the sketches, right? Like you can't do that
Oh,
for any other product
interesting.
from a for-profit company. And we don't release our designs and engineering drawings either, because we have, that's our intellectual property.
Right, right.
But these hand pumps that have become standardized and used throughout the world by so many NGOs, even by the UN, like they're so common and they were, there was so much effort put into them. Now they're public domain. Anyone can use them.
I see.
And so they become very cheap. Cheap doesn't necessarily mean good though. That was something I was learning. I am learning a lot through this work, is that sometimes we bring like a double standard to the products that we produce for people who are in poverty. We think that cheap means, oh, it must be better, and that cheap is what they want because they can't afford more. And we just set a very low standard, a very low bar for that. So even though that's ultimately not what is benefiting them and helping them, that's an aside. But the life pump, yeah, it's not cheap. It is more expensive than a lot of these traditional options. But we feel like when you see the effect and impact it has on these communities, and you see the long-term benefit, and you see the ways that traditional hand pumps have actually failed, we have good evidence of it. It's not just us trying to market ourselves differently. It's like, look at the data and how these people are, after decades after decades, still suffering and still not having reliable access to water. So we think it's worth it. But where does that money come from? That's a really good question. There are a few main sources. So one is through fundraising and donation. So we are in touch with a lot of religious organizations and non-religious. So like churches and other small groups, sometimes they will hear about our work and be very excited about it and say, hey, we want to raise money for this. We want to raise enough money for a pump to give this money to design outreach. Then they can buy the parts, they can have them machined and manufactured and send it out to whatever community that they've now located, is just the next in line to receive a pump.
Yeah.
So fundraising and raising money that way, which is kind of, we obviously have a hand in that. We help them with the organization, with the fundraising and the logistics, but a lot of times fundraising from other sources or just donations from people is a big source of collecting the revenue to do this work. In other cases, we actually also sell our pumps as if they were just like a normal product, and we'll sell pumps to really big organizations that I won't name names, but there's some really big Christian organizations that do humanitarian work. And for them, rather than them, they buy at big scales, right? Not just one or two pumps at a time. They'll buy 10, 20, 30 pumps at a time. And it's a lot better for them to just purchase the pumps, have full control over them, and they now have ownership and can install them. And one way or another, we have to, like you were thinking, cover the cost of that. And that's how we do it. So very rarely do we, I think never do we put the entire burden and cost on a community to say, like, if you want this pump, you got to pay for it. No, a lot of times we understand the circumstances. We're not ignorant of how that they don't necessarily have the means to pay for it, or if they or the economic capital that they have a lot of times is animals or it's other things that we wouldn't even think about exchanging in terms of money.
Right.
So it's coming from these other sources. At the same time, we do also ask the communities to be a part of the transaction. So sometimes a lot of times, I was saying earlier how before we install a pump, the hole has to be drilled, there has to be concrete laid, and a lot of times there's bricks that are made around the pump to kind of give it a foundation for the water to run off so it doesn't get all muddy and stuff. That work we ask the communities to do. And a lot of times the maintenance of the pump, we try to train a few members of the community to take leadership of that. And so they can do minor repairs. And then for bigger work, they would contact us, contact more expert technicians. But in all of this, we're trying to engage the communities to, again, like show and demonstrate that we're trying to do this with them and we're trying to be partners with them, not just coming in and dumping aid and then leaving. Yes. And we find that in the long term, when people feel like they have ownership, they have agency over this technology, they also care for it better and it lasts longer. And there's just greater outcomes that way.
Yeah, just that ripple effect that happens. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So Daniel, I've been asking you a lot about your organization and stuff like that, but I really do want to know too about your education and how you got into like deciding to be a mechanical engineer as well. But as far as the technical side of your job, so are you doing? I know you said you're working on the gearboxes, but can I ask, like, what does that exactly mean? Like, are you doing the actual designing part, or like figuring out ways to make it better, or what does that look like?
Yeah. Another great question. So, as a junior engineer, I can't be tasked with making a lot of the really important decisions.
Sure.
I'll admit to that because I don't have the experience yet,
Right,
and
right.
because I don't have that subject matter knowledge. And this leads into another really interesting aspect of design outreach. Again, our team is really small, so not only can we not afford to always do the work in the field, even just amongst our only half of the staff of our 12 to 15 is R&D engineers.
Mhm.
So if it was just up to us to do the work that we need to do, we would be swamped, and it would just be so overwhelming. We rely a lot on volunteers to be part of our work. So I think from this past year, we probably had between 45 and 60 like regular volunteers who showed up on a regular basis and contributed to our work. A lot of times these are um, retired or still currently working, like engineers, business people, other experts in their fields who, when they've heard about design outreach, said, "Wow, that's amazing! I actually want to be involved in that. I want to use my off time. I want to use my retirement even to contribute to this." And
Wow.
I mean, that's an amazing testimony, I think, of how God is using people and can use all people in any stage of life. But um, for me, what that looks like is this project. So, for instance, this gearbox project, the team is like half full-time staff and half volunteers. And these
Oh,
volunteers are the people who
wow.
are making a lot of those big calls about, I've spent past 30, 40 years designing gearboxes. So I know how this works. I have an intuition for this. And I think we should test this material, or I think we should make this gear that much bigger or smaller to change the physics of how it's working. And then
Mm,
it falls on me as the full-time person to kind of execute on that, because I'm here 40 hours a week. When the
I see.
volunteers,
I
they're
see.
volunteers, so they're not there all the time. But when they are there, they give really, really important advice, really important guidance.
Wow,
So
what a
it's this
wonderful
really,
system.
yeah, very interesting collaboration. Yeah.
I mean, truly, like that's God, like working. Because I feel
Amen.
like that's such an interesting way and a dynamic to work together like that as volunteers and full time staff. And like people really, like their desire is to help. You know what I mean?
Amen.
It's so
Absolutely.
crazy. That's
And
awesome.
if you
Okay.
want to think
Uh
about
huh.
it on like a, sorry, I was just gonna say, if you want to think about it at like a very practical level, volunteers also, they don't need to be paid, and this work that we do, it doesn't make money, right? Where any
Mm,
extra funds or donations and fundraising goes back into the work that we do, and so it's just this amazing way that God is providing resources, even with limited funds that we may have sometimes. Like the fact that people feel called and compelled to be part of the work. Yeah, like you said, it's amazing.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so great. Okay. So what I was going to ask was,
yes.
um, take me back to high school, Daniel. Like, when did you decide, like, I'm going to go to tech and be a mechanical engineer?
You know, I think I made the choice to pursue engineering. I wouldn't say without thought, because I thought about it a lot, but I guess it
Mm,
wasn't. Looking back, it wasn't super serious thoughts. I knew, and I knew I always enjoyed math, science, physics, those kinds of hard STEM, hard sciences, and those subjects. I also knew that I liked how things worked,
mm,
and I liked understanding that, and so and that already put engineering in kind of a promising category. And looking towards college, I said, I engineering is such a big field, and I don't want to like narrow myself too much because I don't know exactly what I want. So mechanical engineering, which is the broadest of engineerings, allows you to do a lot of things. You can
mm.
end up working on airplanes, you can end up working on cars, you can sometimes end up working being a structural engineer and building bridges and roads. So I said, I don't want to commit myself just yet. Let's just do mechanical engineering, and then we'll see where life takes me. So that's how I ended up doing ME. And my pursuit, or my decision to do school was also a very practical decision. I applied to 8 schools and got into maybe 5 or 6 of them, and then it quickly narrowed down to just 2 options: Georgia Tech or Ohio State, which is my state school here in Ohio. And it was just narrowed down based on cost, and because of very special life circumstances that I'm very blessed to have. Even though Georgia Tech was out of state, it became the same price as Ohio State.
Oh,
Like it
wow.
was on par, which in some ways is a blessing, but also it was like, why didn't Ohio State give me more aid because I'm in
Right.
state? But anyhow, it made price, it was the lowest two prices of all my college options. And I just chose between the two of them. And I said,
Mm,
I want to do engineering, and Georgia Tech, not that rankings are everything, but it is more highly ranked. And because it's a tech school, it clearly devotes a lot more money and time and
sure.
energy towards those things. And I like the idea of leaving home for school. So I decided
Yeah.
to go to Georgia Tech. So that's how I ended up there, and just continue with mechanical engineering through my time there. Never really, yeah, didn't think about changing my major or anything. And then that's what I graduated with. So
Oh, wow. So kind of a straight shot.
kind of, yeah. Maybe I make it sound easier than it was, but yeah, I
No,
didn't.
if anyone knows Georgia Tech, it's not an easy feat. But so at any point, so I mean, I guess you didn't really question your decision as far as ME goes, as being a mechanical engineer, or did you? Was there like while you were doing your classes, were you like, was there any doubt at all that this is what you wanted to do, or?
Mm. I will say, personally, just because of the people that I know and am friends with, a lot of my peers were computer science majors.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, if I had to go back and choose again, I would probably consider it more seriously, because it's really hot right now and there's a lot
Oh,
going
yeah,
on in
you're
that
right.
space.
Yeah.
Um, but for whatever reason, I thought engineering is still interesting. And as I was taking classes and doing work and meeting people and going through classes together with these other mechanical engineering friends, I said, I still enjoy this. I still think this is meaningful. And um, to me, I liked the idea that um, hopefully in my future with mechanical engineering, I get to do more hands-on stuff. Computer
Mm.
science, clearly you have to have a computer to do that work. Um, I was a little naive at the time to think that you don't need a computer as much in engineering work, because you also use a lot of, you also are at your desk in front of a computer for a lot of your time as an engineer. But it still gave me the chance to use my hands and
Yes.
like work and see how things fit together. So that was really appealing to me. Um, while I was in college and studying mechanical engineering, I did try to root out some other things about whether I wanted to, specialize or pursue that specifically. So I had one internship with Honda R&D, because I like cars, and so I
Oh,
wanted
cool.
to say, hey, maybe the automobile industry will be interesting. And after working, my biggest takeaway from that was it can be interesting, but my specific experience wasn't that motivating. I didn't like being in a really big company that has a specific culture and a specific pace of moving, which can sometimes feel
Interesting.
really slow.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't imagine doing that right out of school. So then I also during my time in college, I did two different research labs, undergraduate research labs, because I also was kind of attracted to the idea of graduate school and eventually pursuing a PhD. Um, the fun fact is, everyone else in my family, so my mom, my dad, and my sister, they all have their PhDs. So
Oh, oh
not
my
that
goodness.
I have a very, yeah, very elite pedigree in that sense.
Wow.
And I think I maybe felt a little bit of pressure from that, and like,
Sure,
oh,
of
maybe I should pursue it
course.
myself.
Of
Maybe.
course.
Um, but and I've always liked the idea of teaching, and I've enjoyed tutoring other students when I've had the chance. And but professorship is actually very little teaching often and mostly research. And I wanted to know for myself, do I really like research? Can I handle it? Am I the kind of person who would enjoy this? So I did two different research labs, and through both of them, I decided, no, I'm actually not that kind of person.
Mm.
I think research is really important. It's really valuable. It's really interesting when you
Mm-hmm.
talk about it at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
But the day to day for me is really hard to go through,
I see.
because you're taking this really big, cool picture of where you want to go and how you want to improve the world. And then you're just taking a very small slice of it. And it's easy for me to lose sight of that big picture. And a lot of times, at least in how I see it, in my understanding and my experiences, even after you have your results from your research, it may never go to market. It may never become relevant to the world. No one may ever see it or read it for
Mm.
10, 20 years or never. And that to me, I was like, oh, I like seeing more immediate results.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I
Me too. Me too.
it's hard for me to be that kind of person. Yeah. So if anything, the things that I did in college, like internship and research, they were kind of failures in the sense that I ended up not liking them, but they were valuable in that I know I don't have to pursue this anymore.
Right.
And this
Yeah.
isn't
No, I
something
think
I
it was
want to
super
spend time on.
valuable. It doesn't mean if you failed it, because I just feel like, wow, what an opportunity to take advantage of that in college and realize before you graduate and decide to pursue this career that you didn't even know you didn't really enjoy, you know?
Right. Right.
That's pretty cool. So after you graduated, you decided not to pursue your PhD maybe right away. I'm assuming maybe down the line, right?
We'll see. We'll see.
um, but like, yeah. So I guess you alluded to it in the beginning of our discussion, our chat this evening. Like, how did you find out about design outreach? Like, what
Yeah.
were the things that happened in order for you to work there today?
hmm So I graduated, my last semester was the spring of 2020. And that was when the COVID pandemic was,
Right.
really, that was when it was really hitting and quarantine was happening. And my semester got cut short, cut in half. Everyone had to go back home. So I went back to Columbus and was finishing classes online. And during that time, still job searching too. But um, at the time, I really wanted to stay living and working in Atlanta. It was the first time I had basically left home for an extended period, and I really loved the city. I had developed so much community there, and I wanted to work there. So a lot of my job search was focused there. But probably partly from my own enthusiasm and how much diligence I had in job search, but also because of COVID, my job search went really poorly, and it was really hard to land interviews, and it was really common for people to be ghosting me. So that was a really discouraging time.
Discouraging,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely. But in parallel to that, so right before we left campus because of COVID, um, that was when I first learned about design outreach. It's probably like late February, early March 2020, and it was because my mom, who still lives here in Columbus and works at a company, she works for a chemical database company that's actually a pretty big employer to Columbus, so it's pretty well known. And design outreach actually did a partnership with her company, CAS is what it's called, to fundraise together. So this was an example of not like church groups or individuals, but actually
Sure.
companies who would say, hey, we want to fundraise, we want to commit to maybe matching funds from our employees for a life pump. So Greg, one of the co-founders and the CEO of Design Outreach, he went to CAS, gave a speech, kind of a keynote speech about the fundraising and about the work that they do. And through that, my mom was able to meet him and said, oh, you're an engineer, you have an engineering company. My son's an engineer, he's about to graduate. Can I connect you to? Because this might be something he's interested in. So Greg and I had a call. That was the first time I learned about design outreach. And he told me all about the work that they do and the mission, the vision. And I was genuinely interested. But even over the phone, I remember telling him, like, I will think about it. When I said think about it, I really meant think about it. Like, not really considering it, because at the time, that was the first time I'd ever learned that there was a way that you could, pair Christian, like, faith with engineering work. And it was just like so kind of bizarre to me. It was really cool, but I was like, this is not at all what I imagined doing after college. And for multiple reasons. One, to me, I thought, going to nonprofit work and in a small company, I wouldn't be able to learn or develop very quickly.
Sure.
And a lot of people told me that, hey, the first couple, your early 20s and early 30s, or your 20s and early 30s of your career is essential to developing a really strong foundation. If you want to keep progressing your career, you want to, make a good career out of make a good career for yourself. You have to take advantage of those years. So I thought, oh, maybe this company wouldn't set me up for that kind of success. Maybe I would want to come back to this after going to a big company that's more established and whatnot. And I'll be very honest too. I didn't study mechanical engineering to make a lot of money, but when I learned that often is part of the deal, I came to expect it, or I said, oh, that's something that I would really like. And frankly, working for nonprofit work doesn't lead to that a lot of times, doesn't lead to a lucrative career. And that was hard for me at the time. I said, I don't know if I want that. So I was very honest with Greg, and I didn't say everything that I'm saying now, but I said, I'll think about it. This is really interesting. I'll keep it on the back burner. Fast forward 6-7 months, I was back home. I had graduated after completing my classes virtually. Job search was still going poorly. And at that point, I was like, maybe I should consider design outreach more, not necessarily out of desperation, but just, I'm back in Columbus, and I think it's I think it's not just coincidence that Design Outreach is based here in Columbus.
No, it's not. It's
If it
not.
wasn't here and Greg didn't have that conversation with my mom, I don't think I'd ever hear about this company. It's so
Right.
small, didn't know this kind of thing existed. But now that I was back, I actually reached out to them again. I had an in-person conversation for the first time, and I met Greg for the first time, and we talked more. And I knew that he was someone who I could shoot really straight with from the beginning. So I told him a lot of my reservations just point blank. I said, hey, these are the things that make me kind of wary of this job, and I think it's exciting, but these things kind of scare me. Honestly, this is not at all what I thought engineering would look like after I graduated. And he had really great things to say and push back on. He's also a believer. I mean, I think all the people at our company are Christians, and he, yeah, had a lot of challenging things to say about like the ways I think about money, the ways I think about success and career, and just left me with a lot to chew on. And so ultimately, I came back home, spent a month praying about it, talking with friends and family, continuing to job search, still wasn't going anywhere, and just after a lot of deliberation and just thinking about it, ultimately, I was like, I think this is something I want to pursue. And it wasn't like a sudden light bulb moment. It was just a culmination of just a lot of thoughts, a lot of thinking about what do I want in life? What am I trying to get out of my career? And, what does it mean to honor God? And ultimately that led me to pursue the job with Design Outreach. So I applied, went through the whole application process, got the job, and then I still didn't start working just yet because another critical and very unique part of our work is that all the full-time staff are support raised. So I don't know if that terminology means anything to you or to
A lot
others,
to me,
but
actually.
but like it's very similar to, I guess, how missionaries are supported, right?
Yeah, or
They're
like
not paid
campus
for their work.
staff or
Exactly,
something.
campus
Yes.
staff, yeah. So all the full-time staff at Design Outreach are also support raised. So we have to go to our friends and family, just anyone in our network, sometimes beyond our network, to share about this work and say, hey, we would love to partner with you, and basically
Mm,
you donate and support us financially to allow me to do the work that I do.
mm.
To say it very frankly, like that's how I get paid. That's how I get paid to
Yeah,
do this work.
yeah.
And so that was a whole nother very interesting journey because
Wow.
I knew that this job was support raised from the beginning. That was another kind of my struggle
Of
of
course.
whether I wanted to do this or not. I had never done anything like that before. I'd never gone on missions before, so I never had to support raise for anything. And there were so many doubts in my mind of like,
Mm,
can I even do this? Like, can I communicate this well to people and get them excited and but not lie to them? Like show my heart for this work, but also be genuine. And also I had so many doubts about like, do I even know enough people? Do I know the right people? Because
mm.
in my mind, people who enter ministry and these kinds of support race positions, typically they're married or they have families already. They just have big social circles. My social circle was mostly people who just graduated like me. Like
Sure,
they're only
yeah.
just starting their jobs. Like who's going to
Yeah.
give to this? Who, like, how am I even going to make this work? And, and Design Outreach didn't, just leave us, just throw us into the pool. Like they gave us training, they gave us some setup and material to work with, but a lot of the hard work was just on us to prepare and just go out and talk to people. So starting from November until mid-February, 3.5 months, I spent support raising, and I had these specific goals that I had to reach before I could start working with the company, because they wouldn't let me work without paying me, and I
Of course,
needed to
yeah.
reach that goal.
Yeah.
And to some people, 3.5 months may sound like a long time, but it's actually really fast. The training
Mm,
that we went to for support raising, they said it typically takes people, even for people who are working or support raising full time, like I was, because I wasn't working another job, I wasn't in school anymore. People support raising full time can take like 6 to 12, more often 8 to 12 months to get there,
I believe it, yeah.
because it takes a lot of time to meet with people, to follow
Mhm.
up for people. Just because you have a meeting with someone doesn't mean they're going to feel called to give. So to have reached my goal in 3.5 months was, again, God showing his hand at work
I
and
was gonna
providing those
say, if you
resources.
did that in 3.5 months with no problem and people were willing to commit, it was pretty clear, I feel like, where God wanted you.
I think so too. I think so too. And I really can't take credit for it because I had never done support raising before. You can ask some of the people I met with, like the first people I ever met with,
Uh-huh.
my speech was really not confident, and I was stumbling, and I it was
Mm.
uncomfortable. I didn't know how to talk about it.
It is,
And
it's a
still, it worked
Not an
out.
easy thing to
It's
do.
not,
Yeah.
no.
Oh man.
But
So
yeah,
okay,
so
so you came up with the funds within 3 months.
3.5 months, I reached 90% of my support goal. So
That's
our
insane.
company, a lot of organizations, when they ask their staff to support raise, they have their own goals. So for us, it's 90%. And once you reach 90%, you can start working, and then the last 10% you can raise that while you're working
Okay.
over the first year of your full-time work. So yeah, I was able to reach that goal and start working in March. So March was my start date, March 1st this year. And so now I'm only approaching like 6 months of working at this
No,
company.
but I mean, everything that you've explained to me and the things that you've done and the trip that you've taken to see the work being done. I mean, Daniel, in my book, you are saving the world. You are contributing to, you know, to the the mission statement that you presented to me at the very beginning of our conversation, and I am so inspired right now. It's like so wonderful. It's so great. Um I want to ask too, like, before we're coming up kind of like on an hour, a little bit.
I have time.
Oh, you do? Good, good.
Yeah.
Good, good. Um, yeah, I wanted to know, I mean, you kind of already laid it out for me, like some of the benefits of your job or what you enjoy about it, but could you reiterate it for me again? Like, what do you like most about what it is that you do? Because I feel like, even though it sounds wonderful,
Hmm.
it's challenging. Like, I've heard bits and pieces now where, I mean, fundraising, number one, like, is not an easy thing. I will be transparent with you right now. When I first graduated college, I contemplated being a Campus Crusade staff,
Hmm.
and yeah, like that was one of the factors. I was like, man, I don't know if I can do that. Like,
Right, right.
and it's intimidating, but for me, it's like, wow, God really had a hand and favor over you in doing that process. Oh, by the way, so your parents were okay with this?
That's a good question. Yeah, to give a little bit
Your
more background.
PhD parents were okay with
Yeah.
this? I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah. My parents are actually separated, and my dad is not a believer, but my mom is.
I see. That's
And
even more
so
challenging, I feel like.
it was. And so for my dad, it was naturally, I wasn't surprised. It was difficult for him to understand this direction, this
Mm,
choice, because he doesn't see importance or much value in the faith aspect, which is so foundational to our work.
mhm.
So for him, he can see the humanitarian benefit. He
Sure.
can definitely admit to that, but he was still like, yeah, this doesn't seem like it really sets up your career. It seems like, you know, his compromise was that this is something you can try for now and just see how it works, but like, I don't see this as a long-term
I
career for you.
see.
And I think this is just when you're in your early 20s, you can just try new things. Um, for my mom and my sister, who's also a big part of my older sister, a big part of my life, and she's also a Christian. The two of them were also had some reluctance when I first shared about this job with them. They said,
Mm,
"Oh, support raising sounds really hard. This work sounds really unique and even unusual." But the more that I talked with them, the more that I think I prayed about it and showed my heart for it. I'm so grateful that they were really supportive, and they said, if this is something you feel called to, like, we're there for you, we're for you,
wow,
and
wow.
we want to see you succeed in this too. So I was really blessed by that, and
Yeah,
to
so
have their
special.
their buy-in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Okay, so what I was saying was, oh
Hmm.
yes, so there are a lot of challenges in your work, even though like the bigger picture of things in the package is like incredible, right? But yeah, like what do you enjoy the most?
Hmm. I think several big things come to mind. One, which I kind of touched on earlier, is being able to see the overall journey and like full picture, full circle of the work that we do
Mm,
is really really satisfying and fulfilling for me. At least I don't have experience. This is my first full-time engineering position, but I imagine for other people who are working in really big companies, really big corporations, Honda R&D. That's what I have experience with. You are to be efficient and to be effective as a company, you typically specialize. You have to focus on one thing, and you have that one part that you're contributing to, and maybe you don't necessarily see what it looks like in the final product.
Sure. Yeah.
You just know that you're contributing, you're working together well as a team with all these other departments. But for us, like, because we're a small team, everyone's involved in many different ways. I've seen what it looks like to take a design from a drawing, to be prototyping it, to be testing it, maybe just in little ways, but I've seen all those things to now being in the field and seeing it go into the ground and seeing people get water from it. Like that full picture, I don't take that for granted. Like, being able to see that and be a part of it is really cool. And to know I had a hand in like many different places along the way. That's really awesome.
Mm.
I think another thing is I'm very blessed by my whole team, all the coworkers and staff at the company. This is a personal preference because I'm a Christian, but because all our staff are Christian, every morning we have what we call the all hands meeting, where we just kind of update, what's our good things that are happening, what are things that are difficult, and like kind of some prayer requests. And then we'll pray together as a team, because we believe prayer and our faith is just so core to everything that we do. And that God is really the one who's doing this work, and we're just trying to follow his lead and obey well. And that to have that kind of environment to work in is really fascinating. And again, I don't have perspective for what it looks like to be in a non-Christian workplace, but I can still tell that this is special.
Yeah, it's not like that.
Yeah, it's not like that everywhere. And that doesn't mean it's without difficulty. Like, we still say things unintentionally and hurt each other. And there were even moments last week where I didn't realize a coworker was expecting me to stand up for her and for a certain design choice. And I was kind of just, hands off. And she said afterwards, like, oh, I thought you had my back. What was going on? So, we still have tension just like any workplace, but the fact that we all have this common foundation and this common mission, I think is just such a cool team dynamic to have. So that's really great. And I think, there's just so many, the fact that I got to travel and experience something I'd never been to Africa before, let alone on a missions trip. And so to have that experience, to have my eyes open to a bigger part of the world, and it is just such a privilege. I realize that's really not common for a lot of people. And amongst my friend group, probably I'm the only one who will ever go to Zimbabwe, like it's, so there's just so much special about this job and the work that we get to do. Those are the big things that come to mind. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm curious, Daniel, do you happen to know if there are other like organizations similar to yours?
I do know that some exist.
Okay.
And I know those because we partner with them, or a lot of times we work with them. So there are, I don't know the names off the top of my head.
That's okay.
But I know some of the contacts. And there's a version of basically design outreach that focuses more on civil construction. So like building roads and bridges, that exists. There's one that's also focused on, or also does work with water. But rather than building hand pumps, they focus on piped water, like normal plumbing, like we would see in our own homes. And that obviously serves a different population, not rural communities, where it would be unsustainable to have that kind of infrastructure, but in more urban environments, when there's more dense populations, those kinds of organizations exist. But like very broadly, there's not that many. Okay. It's not a super populated space to be both Christian and engineering and have these things come together. So nice. Yeah.
But there are options.
There are options out there if you look for them. And I can't say I could direct you to all of them, but I know the people who could. So yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, I feel like was there anything else you wanted to share that I maybe missed or you wanted to talk about?
I will. Okay. I guess there's a little bit more detail I can give about the company broadly. And I've been talking pretty much this whole time about Life Pump and about water, because that's something that was something the co-founders had a passion and vision for, early on, and they knew they wanted to serve the water problem and the water crisis across the world. But that isn't the only thing that Design Outreach wants to be known for.
Oh,
We're not
yes.
just a water pump company, but we
I was gonna
also,
ask you that. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
okay.
okay, but
We want to be known broadly as an R&D humanitarian technology company. So again, there are really big Christian nonprofits, NGOs who I won't name, but a lot of times they also provide these kinds of technologies to serve people, but a lot of times they themselves don't have their own R&D department doing the development. They buy the
I
technology from
see.
somewhere else, or someone
Okay.
else makes it for them, which isn't necessarily wrong or bad, but it means you don't have control over your own design. You kind of just are at the mercy of whoever you're buying it from, your supplier. We, our very big vision, our CEO always casts very big visions for our company. We eventually want to be known as the go-to R&D company for the world's nonprofits, whether they're
Yeah.
Christian or non-Christian. And not because we're necessarily ruthless and pushing everyone else out of the field, but because we want a reputation of work that is really excellent, that serves people really well. And we
Mm.
back it up with this commitment to go back to them for this long-term reliability, this long-term serving these people, and also sharing the gospel with them.
Mm.
So with that being said, water and sanitation is one big area that we're focusing on. So Life Pump is just one of the technologies. There's also some other ones that we've developed there. And then the two other sectors that we are currently moving in towards, one right now with a little more progress than the other, are global health and agriculture, because these three categories we see as really foundational to a lot of the impoverished world that is really lacking in infrastructure and technology, and just has been really left behind in development. And another terminology, or another term we use a lot when we talk about this work, is appropriate technology.
Mm.
Appropriate meaning it's appropriate for the places that they're being used and the people that we're trying to serve. So another, I think, fallacy, or another kind of misstep that a lot of traditional humanitarian approaches take, I would say, is we try to use technology that we've honestly optimized and maybe perfected for use in the first world, and we just drop it in third world countries and expect it to be useful. Sometimes
Mm.
we'll give them our used technology, lightly used, or sometimes even new.
Sure.
And I
Yeah.
think there's good heart, there's good motivation behind it, but there's so many impracticalities to that a lot of times people and countries and companies who donate never see or never really think about. And an example of that is right now, one of the technologies we actually were, I wasn't doing it personally, but two of my other team members were on our trip to Zimbabwe. We were talking with Karanda Mission Hospital we're talking about their need for something called a wound vacuum pump. So this technology exists in the US, and basically for really deep wounds, really like, I don't know much about this because it's not my area expertise, but for really deep wounds, a lot of times to get them to heal properly and heal efficiently, you would basically put something on it that it's like a vacuum. It creates suction, it creates negative pressure, a vacuum. And by pulling up on the skin, it like increases blood flow, it increases healing, and and it's pretty common, and it's a go-to care for a lot of people in the US for certain kinds of injuries and for ailments. And there have been examples of taking these wound vacuum pumps and dropping them in Africa and hoping that they would work, and they don't. First of all, these pumps need electricity. Electricity is something that we're so take for granted in the US. Is not always available in these rural hospitals, or it's inconsistent. And even if you have electricity, it's not even the same voltage. It's not the same rating. It doesn't have the same outlet.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
a lot of times, because of the supply chain and just like the wealth of resources we have in the United States, we are able to make a lot of medical technology use reusable parts or disposable one-time use things, which is good in terms of hygiene. Like there's a lot of advantages to that, but it requires you to be able to get things really quickly and to constantly
Mm.
have supply of that. That is really impractical, implausible in these countries and these communities which are really rural, which are really far removed from big cities. And so either they have to reuse things in a way that makes it non-hygienic and more dangerous, or they just have to go without. So they need this wound vacuum pump. They also have cases of patients who need this technology, but there's no appropriate technology for
Of
them.
course.
So design outreach, what we're trying to do is say, Karanda has made us apparent of this. They're a partner of ours. They made us aware of this problem. And now we're trying to do some investigation and research to say, how can we design something that is appropriate, that could be used for this? Ideally, it'd be lower cost, but never to compromise on quality, and
Mhm.
basically something that would serve these people well. Because there's a saying that we also, another saying that we have in the office, which is 90% of the world's tech of the, or what is it? 90% of the world's products are developed for only 10% of its population.
Ooh.
If you think about smartphones, if you think about cars, if you think
Right.
about
Everything really.
computers, almost, yeah, so much stuff is developed for just a really small portion of the people who live
Yeah.
on the earth.
Yeah.
And it plays right into this whole dynamic of appropriate technology and how there's so many
Yeah.
people who are left behind, so many people who aren't getting what they need and don't
Hmm.
even have basic necessities. Like that's like what's really dire about the situation. And so um, I'm using a lot of phrases that Greg used and has kind of imparted on me, but this is like the why of design outreach, why we exist, why it needs to exist, and why it's important that we do this work, because
Yes.
there's so many people who aren't being served this way. And it'd be easy for us to just focus on doing the technology, but we maybe make it harder for ourselves by also bringing the gospel piece.
Mm.
That may mean we get less funding. Maybe people who would give to a secular organization won't give to us because we're Christian
Mm.
affiliated. And but we made the decision that, like, for us it's to bring to bring flowing reliable water but also living water to these people, like
Amen.
those together.
Yes. Let's
That's
go.
crucial. That's what's really going to change people's lives. So um yeah, if it sounds like I'm have this rehearsed, it's because I've heard it so many times, and I believe it now. Like this, the context that we're working in, situation, and how urgent it is, and why we have to be doing this work. So
This is fantastic. I love every single part of it. I think, I mean, honestly, it's practicality,
mm,
bringing together with what we believe as Christ followers and executing it. There's nothing better, for me, because I too like immediate results too, like seeing the work happen. And man, it's just, I'm so blessed by this conversation right now. It's so great. And my eyes have been open to the possibilities, right? Of like faith and career coming together,
yeah, yeah.
So it's really great, Daniel. Do you have any advice? Like, I don't want to say like advice about your job really, but just any advice at all to like a young person listening to this podcast right now?
Yeah, I think I do. Um I think one thing I'll say, so two things. One thing quickly is, as much as I've said and kind of promoted design outreach, because I really do believe in the mission and that the
Yeah.
work that we're doing is valuable and needed, this does not diminish work that is not so clearly tied to the gospel, or not producing technology for the other 90% of the world. There's value and importance to all the work that people
Mm-hmm.
do. I talked about fundraising, the fact that all of our staff are support raised, the fact that we need to fundraise a lot of times to, have the funds to then donate these pumps to people. That money has to come from somewhere. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times people are called to jobs to make money so that they can give generously and so that they can support the
Yes.
church and the body in the way that it's working all around the world. So not that that's the only reason you should take a job or not take a job, but don't think that this is the only way you can honor God in your work. I think for
Yes.
me, this is the answer for me right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm blessed that God has given me the opportunity to take it. But there's so many ways that God can use you in your season, in your place, in your environment to serve. And I think that's a big lesson I learned. Not to think that design outreach is the only way to live, and and then I think the second part of what I would say, maybe advice, is again something I'm learning a lot right now is humility.
Mm.
um, because of the way that our projects work, and a lot of times I'm with engineers who are 30, 40 years my senior, who are much more experienced, have a lot, like, to them it's like second nature, all these decisions and these things.
Sure.
I find myself asking so often, like, hey, can you slow down? What does that mean? And if you know me as a person, I can kind of get prideful, and I don't want to look dumb. I don't want to ask dumb questions. I don't want people to think I'm slow. And, part of me is like, I got a college degree from Georgia Tech. I should be able to know some of this. I should be able to figure this out. But humility is not that. And being able to be confident in who you are, and if you're a Christian, who God says you are, I think goes a really long way, and will make you just better as a worker, better as a contributor, better as a friend. Like, I'm continuing learning to put aside my pride and say, like, it's okay that I don't know this, and if I approach this with the right heart, there's nothing to be ashamed of, and I can do so much better work. And I think I could have started that as early as college, saying like, my grades don't define me, saying, like, really owning those beliefs of like, there's no stupid questions, and even if they are stupid questions, to get to a place where people's opinions of me don't dominate what I think about, and I am not so concerned about my image. I want to be seen as someone who's humble and who's always willing to learn. That's like what I'm currently trying to be like, not someone who knows it all.
No, but I totally feel you in that, and I think I'm so thankful. Thank you for your transparency and vulnerability tonight. But that last piece on humility, I think, is important for a lot of people to hear, and including myself some days, and, in general, right? People that have degrees and stuff are prideful in the sense of, yeah, they've earned this. But I would even go as far as to say, as an Asian American people, right? Like, even more so, it's embedded in us almost, like that.
Yeah.
We have this pride, and that is hard to like, yeah, just admit, like, hey, I don't know the answer. Like, how did you do that? And it's so hard. And I really appreciate you speaking out on that right now. So thank you so much, Daniel, for everything.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun, and just thinking about these questions makes me more grateful, and makes me even more reflective about how I can be more humble and be better.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, would you be okay if somebody maybe really enjoyed this podcast episode and maybe had more questions for you? Would you be okay with me connecting them with you?
Absolutely. I would love to have those conversations, whether it's about design outreach specifically, or just about being a believer in the workplace, or just like being an engineer, what you feel called to. I love having those conversations, and I will definitely make time for that. And if you are interested in design outreach specifically, please, reach out. We're trying to expand a lot right now. I just a plug, a shameless plug.
No, thank you.
We're trying to look for. We're always looking for more people, because there's so much work to be done, and we believe this is really important, and we believe this is an amazing opportunity to do that work if you feel called to it. So I really encourage that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel. You guys, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can DM me through social media, or you can email me at podcastwigu@gmail.com, and I'll get you connected with the right people. Thanks again, Daniel. Thanks again, guys, for listening. Until next time. Bye.